have found to be helpful and beneficial. It's very important to us that we get your input as well. So let's start off with a few images to perhaps whet our appetite and inspire us tonight. This image, the first 5 images I photographed. So this one is called Will It Go Round in Circles? And it was juried into a Snap JCC exhibit a couple of years ago. I'm going to point out that this image was made with the app Slow Shutter, and we'll be talking about that later on in the program. As I have traveled on my photographic journey, I've grown to challenge myself to see with fresh eyes. And that's what I call this particular body of work. It's part of the Seeing with Fresh Eyes concept. And that is to see familiar things with a sense of newness and discovery. In this particular image, I also used the Slow Shutter app. So you can start and get the picture of how important that app is to me. I was challenged by a small photography group that I'm in to put together a body of work in diptych form. And my body of work for this challenge, I call Theme and Variations. In this particular example, the image on the left side I call Legato, and the image on the right side I call Staccato. And Legato was photographed with the Slow Shutter app, and Staccato, this is a technique I just kind of experimented with and played with. I put the camera in macro mode, and before I focused, this is what I got, which I thought was pretty cool. Another diptych, this is called Unison and Harmony, and both of the images were photographed with the macro feature in Camera Plus. This image is an example of using the camera that you have with you. And in this particular instance, that was my iPhone. This is one of the images, one of the 2 images that I turned in to the Snap Second Harvest project. So you can see that iPhone images work for all purposes, exhibits, for special projects. We don't need to limit ourselves. Beth Brown is up next.
My photos are kind of scattered here, there, and everywhere. This one I call Dreaming in Blue. I kind of wanted to call it Blue and Cream. That might be more appropriate. But I made this with, I actually snapped it with my phone, and then I did some editing in Snapseed. This I call the Individualist. You can probably figure out exactly why that is. It's semi-abstract and at the same time realistic. This image I made with an app I'm going to talk about later called ToolWiz, and the title is Afternoon Cooler. This photo, I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly when I took this, and it's something that I liked, but I couldn't come up with a real feeling or what I thought it represented. So I ended up just calling it Mystery in Green. And this is a day in the arts. And this is another example of the camera that you have with you. And that was made at the Frist one day when I was down there.
This is called Aunt Lula. It's an image in which I tried to capture some of the feel about who this, a dear aunt of mine. was and what she was, what she was like. And it was in an online exhibit at the Still Point Gallery. I used just my native phone camera to take the pictures and then used Image Blender to put them together. I was having lunch with a friend and just happened to glance down, and there was this glass of water with the light coming through it. And I was just, I was so taken with it. The name is ALayer. It's one of those examples of if I hadn't had my smartphone with me, I never would have, wouldn't ever have seen the light of day. This was in an exhibit for the Brentwood Photography Group at the Franklin City Hall. This is called A Place for the Heart, and it was won an award for composition in the Still Point exhibit called Home. And this was printed and not only shown on their online gallery, but printed in their magazine. This one's called Prayers Rising, again, taken with my native camera and then processed in Snapseed and Image Blender. And this one, this was in the International Photo Competition of the Professional Photographers Association and was awarded a merit. So it's a merit image displayed at their annual conference. This was in a chromatic show. It's called Earth Flow. I think I either I did the finishing, the processing of it in either Artista Impresso, which we'll talk about a little later, or in Glaze, which we won't say much about, but it's another app that does similar kinds of things. It was in a chromatic show and actually sold.
The last several years, I've been paying attention to thresholds, or another way to say it might be passageways from one way of life to another, or liminal space. And so several months ago, I was riding as a car passenger through South Carolina when we approached this tunnel, and suddenly I thought, a threshold, here it is. And so I grabbed my phone camera, which I like to call it. I have a camera that happens also to serve as a phone and a variety of other ways of communication. And with the Camera Plus 2 app, I photographed this threshold. And then there was a day when I was walking the mall, which used to be a common occurrence for me until recent months. And I saw this woman walking through the mall, on the other side of the mall, actually carrying a red purse. And I was mesmerized by her red purse. And so I quickly changed my route and worked myself around behind her so I could photograph her as we walked in the mall. I used the slow shutter app for this particular photograph. The next 3 images are 3 images of an 8-image body of work titled Pictures of Promise. And these 3 images have been exhibited in 2 places, in Franklin and at Scarrett Bennett Center. The context for the body of work has to do with our divided nation. And in my images, I've explored our common ground that transcends our division. Or another way to say it is that I have explored the theme of hope. So the title of this image is Love Showers All with Blessing. Tears melt away. The future is open. And on these images, I think perhaps I said, if not, I use probably the slow shutter app. There are many reasons for claiming our smartphones as an invaluable resource for our creativity toolbox. And we want to share with you some of those reasons now. First, the quality of smartphones continually improves so that the end result is equal to the results of professional cameras. A true artist never dismisses a possible means to creativity out of hand. And so the smartphone expands our creativity. The smartphone has respectability as it is being used by photographers of note. It has come of age. And let me share with you a couple of examples. Here is Charles Needle, photographer, teacher, leader of photography tours, who is in the middle of a field in Tuscany photographing with his iPhone. Look at where his big boy camera is. It's with his iPhone, I think his is iPhone, with his smartphone that he's photographed, and Sue Henry happened to see him as he was doing this. Also, John Paul Caponigro, whom some of you met through the Brentwood Photography Group, has had a major one of his exhibits, created it through his use of his smartphone. And I would also share that DeWitt Jones is another world-known, respected photographer who uses his smartphone quite a bit. We'll be reading David Duchemin next month, as Emily has already said, and this is what he has to say about smartphones. One of the greatest gifts to photography in recent years is the iPhone and the mobile photography movement in general. Some of my favorite photographs have been made with these simple cameras, and they prove that it's the composition and vision that matter, not the complexity or name brand of the gear. So another reason for using the smartphone to create fine art photography is that it adds an immediacy to our work. It is, as we've already witnessed to, it is the camera we have always have with us. Its accessibility contributes to a daily practice of paying attention in the moment. And finally, we would say that it can be a means to daily photographic journaling. Sue, I think you have a story to share about that.
Well, I was just going to say that the concepts of daily practice and photographic journaling are ones that I definitely subscribe to. I photograph with my iPhone nearly every day in my garden, creating what I call morning in the garden. I have a little chair that I go and sit in after I've spent time photographing, and I literally process the images on my phone sitting in my garden. And I generally pick one image nearly every day to share on Facebook. And I post it on social media from that little chair. So, so this has truly become my daily practice. It's my photographic journaling. So as Sharon and Susan and Beth and I talked, we agreed that there were that this list is a reasonable sample of some of our favorite apps for making the images. We will discuss a little bit more in depth several of these, but not all. We're going to make an effort as much as possible to always include the icon that goes along with the app. We have learned from personal experience that sometimes you hear the name of an app and you go search for it on your app source, and you see all of these apps, and many of them are very similar, and you don't know the specific one. But if you have the icon, you can put a picture with the app, and it'll help you make a wiser choice. So I'm going to start first with the app Camera Plus 2. This is probably my favorite app of choice for making of the images. I also, before I get into detail on this particular app, I want to say that one of the things that I do with my camera apps is I put all of the Making the Images apps in one folder on my phone, and I have a separate folder for processing the images. Not everybody does that. When we've had discussions amongst the four of us, some alphabetize their apps and others have different techniques, but that is one that I have found useful for me. The other thing I want to say as we walk through this Camera Plus 2 app is it is my intention to acquaint you with some of the various features of the app, as opposed to trying to teach you how to actually use the app. The app is extremely robust and has a lot of options available to you. So if you look at the app itself, I've opened it up, and in the upper left-hand corner of the app, where the blue arrow is, you will see an icon that gives you some options for tools. And so when you click on that icon, you can see different tools that you can select or not select: geotag, grid, level, zoom, focus peaking, clipping time. The choices are yours. You can personalize the app as you want to. The next icon, moving to your right at the upper portion of the app, gives you lighting options. That's pretty standard for most of these apps. As we move on, the center of the app, you'll see many camera mode options. My personal favorites are macro. I think you already got a hint of that with some of my images from the first, the portrait mode, and the magic MIL mode. That is much like AI, kind of like a preset, maybe even a preset on steroids. When you have it in magic MIL, not much can go wrong. You're in good shape. Moving on to your right, you will see the aspect ratio options. Emily Naff, our book discussion leader, has challenged us to change the aspect ratio as we photograph, to shoot with a different aspect ratio than we're used to photographing with. With just a couple of taps, you can change that aspect ratio very easily. And the front back camera option is pretty standard on most all apps or on our phone. So that's not a big deal or anything particularly new. At the bottom of the app is one of my favorite features, and this is the exposure compensation dial. And you simply slide your finger to the right or to the left to choose your exposure compensation. It's a wonderful feature. Camera Plus 2 has a feature that they call Lightbox, and you have the option to store any photos that you make in the Camera Plus 2 Lightbox. I personally choose to store the photos with my regular photos all together in one place on the phone. But in acquainting you with the features, I felt like I needed to point out that it did have this Lightbox feature. By the same token, I feel like I need to point out that there are basic editing tools with Camera Plus 2. This is another feature that I don't utilize. I prefer to do my editing in Snapseed. But again, I felt like to give you an overall view, I needed to point that out. I think this is something that, well, let me just say, I don't often take advantage of. I sometimes get so involved with a new app and I just start experimenting and playing around and forget to go to the menu and the settings. And I highly encourage you to take advantage of what's available in the menu and settings, especially in this app. There are tutorials, there are helps, but there are also some settings that you can set that are just, some of them are have to do with image quality, but some of them are just plain fun. You can choose to have your quality and format of your image. I checked, and I have mine checked on TIFF format because that gives you the highest quality of image. You can also set your camera. Let me back up. You can also set your phone, where you pick up your phone and you say macro, and the phone automatically goes to the Camera 2 app and opens it up in macro. So you have that capability of personalizing how you want to use that app. It's kind of fun. The 3 lines at the bottom of this app indicate the icon that will take you to the menu and settings function. Pretty logical that the camera icon at the bottom takes you to the camera section. And if you notice the flower shape icon, that will take you to the light box within the app. As I said before, Camera Plus 2 is an extremely robust app, and in my opinion, very worth exploring.
Fuji Camera 2 is an app it's strictly for taking photos. It has no editing options whatsoever. And don't be confused by the name Camera 2, thinking that it's going to be like the one Sue just got through talking about, because it's absolutely nothing like that. This is one instance where knowing what the icon looks like might be helpful if you're searching for something. And even though it doesn't have any editing features, it does have some other things. It has access to doing some manual controls like ISO or exposure, and if your phone supports it, you can also shoot in RAW. When you open it up, it opens up to the camera, and here you'll see the blue arrow pointing to panorama. It has 10 different modes for shooting, and panorama is obviously the one we're looking at here. The white arrow in the middle shows the direction that the camera is set to pan. But if you want to change the direction, you just tap the arrow and it will go the other way too. If you need more light, next to the button, you'll see something that kind of resembles lightning, and if you tap on that, it'll turn on a light to light up your image. And farther to the right of that is an icon that's supposed to resemble your phone, and if you tap that, that's where it changes from the back camera to the front camera. When you want to select another mode, you just slide that to the left of the panorama, and you can see that you can go to RAW or HDR, and then the next one is the burst mode. This app will take up to 20 photos in burst mode, and if you don't want that many, you just tap on the button to stop whenever you're ready to stop. Sliding a little bit farther over to the left, you come to the photo.
Which
Other way.
Sorry.
It's okay. This is just pretty much a straight photo shot, but if you tap some of the icons on the right side of the screen where the pink arrow is pointing to the dots, all those are available actually in all of the modes. And if you tap on any one of them, it opens up icons for your manual exposures. This is the exposure slider. You see the blue arrow pointing to. And just below that, of course, you slide that back and forth to change your brightness or your exposure. And below that, you'll see some squares that open up other options. The first one on the left is the focus, then the exposure, which we're looking at here. Then you have white balance, and you have a timer and a grid. And the timer and the grid have a disabled slash through them, but those are not permanent. If you tap on the timer, it opens up the option to set a 3, 5, or 10-second delay in taking the photo. If you tap on the grid, you get a series of overlays on your image to choose from, like the horizon, the rule of thirds, or just a grid on there. So those are just some of the things that will show you. I was going to mention the other two modes. If you keep sliding to the left, you see you can shoot video or high frames per second, or the ones that you don't see are slow motion or time lapse.
Next screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Average Camera Pro is a great app for photographing multiple exposures. It really facilitates impressionistic photography and other kinds of photography as well. So I want to share with you just a bit about Average Camera Pro. If you look at the bottom right corner, you will see settings, and when you click on that, you get this overlay on your camera. First, you have the number of pictures you wish to take in your multiple exposure, and it can be anywhere between 1 and 128. I mean, we're talking about serious multiple exposures here. Or, secondly, you can set the shooting interval in seconds between each exposure, from anywhere to 0 to 30 seconds. And finally then, there's a pre-start timer in seconds, so you can delay the beginning of your multiple exposure sequence by any period of seconds from 0 to 90. Sue Henry's opening image of the tree was shot in Average Camera Pro with 8 exposures. And you'll see that image again as we get to the questions. It's on our question page. It's coming up. You'll see it again. Slow Shutter is a wonderful app for photographing motion or using blur if you choose to do that. Again, impressionistic work as well as anything else you might want to do. The photograph that I showed you in the beginning of the woman with the red purse was shot with the Slow Shutter app. Here you see the cog in the left bottom corner that sets in place the choices that you have. And in capture mode, you first have motion blur. And there you can set the blur strength, the shutter speed, the ISO. On shutter speed, you can either set a specific shutter speed, or I often put it on bulb, which means the shutter will be open as long as you hold the camera release button down. When you let it go, the exposure stops. Another capture mode is light trail. And again, you can adjust the light sensitivity as well as the shutter speed and the ISO to determine the light trail that you want. Or finally, there's a low light setting, which enables you to adjust noise reduction as well as shutter speed and ISO. So it's a great app for photographing motion and working with blur.
So here's the composite again. You'll notice we put the cost of each of the different apps, as well as whether they are available for iPhone and for Android. I want to say just a few words about the other 4 that were listed there. The DMD Panorama is available for both iPhone and Android. And it's, it's basically doing a panorama. It's very, very easy to use. They're little comma-like things, and you just move them together. Now, as as iPhones and Androids and other phones get better and better cameras, sometimes they include the panorama function, or sometimes it's included on some of the other apps that we've talked about earlier. The Pro HDR is quite a good HDR app, and it's a second edition, has a wide dynamic range, and you can either put it on auto, or you can do it you could pick manual. Has a bunch of other features too. The 645 Pro, although none of the 4 of us have used that, we wanted to mention it because it's fully manual, and it's designed to sort of mimic the experience of an SLR photographer. So you feel just right at home in using it, because you know what some of the things are and can enjoy it that way. And then of course there's the native camera on your phone, whatever you have. These are the icons that go with the different apps that we've been talking about, again, to help you should you decide to look for them.
So Emily, this might be a time to kind of catch us up with any questions.
We do have a couple questions, and you may have sort of answered some of them, but I'm going to read them. And I'm also going to say maybe the storm's gone by, so maybe the meeting will continue uninterrupted.
It's over here now.
Showed us that the Footage 2 is not just for Android. Is that right? That's the question. Is it just for Android, or is this being presented as an Android option to Camera Plus 2 is the actual question.
It is only available for Android. It's not an iPhone option.
Okay. What model phones do you all use? I know 3 of you have iPhones. What actual models do you all have and use? Let's start with you, Sue.
Mine's a 10.
An iPhone 10.
Yes.
I have the iPhone 11 Pro.
I have the iPhone 8 Plus.
I have the Samsung 9 Plus.
Michael Ross wants to know, how can you get high enough resolution for printing with the Camera Plus 2?
There's
Did
an
you use
app.
that for the harvest donation? Go ahead.
There's an app for that. It's called Big Photo. We're not going to talk much about it, but it comes later under the processing.
So those are the only comments that have come in on the chat box. If anybody else has a question right now, you can unmute.
Going to go on, and maybe we'll generate some more questions as we talk about the other areas, other kinds of apps.
That's good.
Emily, Susan, this is Lee. I was muted. I thought I was unmuted, but I do have one question while we're in the shooting part of this. I think it was Beth mentioned one of the apps had the ability to shoot in RAW. Do you all have experience shooting in RAW? Are there other apps that you know about that will save it in RAW so you can post-process later?
You can shoot in RAW in the Fuji app, or if you have Lightroom on your iPhone, you also can shoot in RAW with it.
I think there's several apps. You just have to look at the individual apps, but several camera apps for making images allow you to shoot in RAW. And I think Sue mentioned earlier that you shoot in TIFF and Camera Plus 2, I think, don't you? Which is
Yes.
similar. It's full resolution, similar to RAW.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So these are these are some apps for processing images. You've heard us mention some of them. Once again, the prices, and whether or not they're available for both iPhone and Android.
Should we just say a word that there's some that you could be confused, not by our chart, but for example, there is Average Camera Pro app for the Android, but I understand it has no similarity to the iPhone app that we just described. And I think that also may be true. Is it true also, Beth, for Slow Shutter as well? It's a completely different app. So don't be fooled by the same name for both Android and iPhone in terms of thinking that they always have the same functions.
That is true sometimes. I know I'm not sure about the Slow Shutter, how it works, because I don't have it, but I do think it's different from the one on the iPhone.
Okay, so this is Snapseed that's been mentioned now several times. It's available for both iPhone and Android, the blue arrow is pointing to where if you want, where you tap to go in and get the picture that you want. And then down at the bottom, you'll see it says looks, and there's a whole series of filters that you can put on your image to make it look in different ways. I just did one as just to show you, and this was in the one called Pop. Then the middle button is Tools, and that's the one I probably use the most of all. Here you can see there are several tools that do all kinds of different things, many of whom you would you will know the function of. I use crop a lot. I frequently just come to Snapseed to crop something and then save it. I want to talk just a little bit about the Tune Image tool. Under this tool, you get several different ways to tune the image, and you can either slide your finger up and down to get to the one you want, or like if you wanted warmth, you could just tap warmth. So you can do it either way. And this was the thing I think that was that surprised me most, is if you want to in order to change the brightness, what you do is put your finger on the picture and slide to the right or to the left. And you'll see the bar at the top of the screen that shows you how much you're doing that by. But rather than putting your finger up on the slider, you put your finger actually on the photo. Healing is another one. This is similar for those of you that use Photoshop. It's similar to the healing brush. I think a lot of processing applications have ways of doing healing. What happens in Snapseed when you do that, you put your finger on the area you want to change and you get this little red dot, and then it changes. And you can't make the little red dot any smaller, and you can't make it any larger. You just have to keep applying it. And I have to say, for this function, sometimes it works just great, and sometimes it really doesn't. So you kind of have to play around with it to see. You will notice down at the very bottom, one tab over from the X is an undo arrow. So you can't undo it if you don't like the way it was done. One of the really fun tools, as far as I'm concerned, there is in the portrait mode, in which if you have a friend or someone whose picture you've taken and they're not smiling, you can actually nudge the corners of their mouth up. And then the next one, which is head pose, you can shift their head just a little. And then when you've made all the changes that you want to make, you press export, and then there's another page, and because with some choices of where to export it, and you do export again if you want it to go to your photo library. The next one I want to talk about is the one called Artista Impresso. This is basically an app that will turn your photos into a piece of artwork in the sense of painting, painting app. It's available as the screen says for both iPhone and Android. And Beth says the screens look very much the same. This particular company that makes this makes several apps, and they have a little bit idiosyncratic a way they set up their tabs, their icons. But once you've learned them from one app, then it's consistent through all the apps they do. So down at the bottom, you'll see the camera, and that's what that's the one you press to get photo. It says get photo. And then once your photo will come in, usually in the next slide, please. Usually in the set of filters called Alta Prima. I finally looked up what that meant. It means at once. And these are they're just several filters here that will you can use to change the way that the image looks. There's another set called In Plein Air, which also you can kind of flip through those, and as you move as you move from one to the next, it will show you what it'll show you what the change would be up in the box. The tab that's being pointed to now, like a little has a little brush on it, and that's how you can adjust the brush stroke, the brush size, the brush depth, some color enhancements, and the edge. You can either have an edge like a frame or have none at all, and this is where you change it. Then the next one, which there's no arrow on, nope, in between, there's no arrow, just to the right of the blue arrow now is where they have kind of a library of frames, so you can go in and pick different frames. This is called the adjust. Wait a minute, sorry. This is where you can adjust the strength and the style of the particular filter when you're working in plein air. You'll see at the top it says in plein air. They, for some reason, have two different sets of things they allow you to do, but this you can only use in the filters that are in plein air. And you'll notice this is like a little artist palette. And the bottom where it says palette, those are basically different kind of tonal colors. And you'll see now that that same icon has changed to looks like somebody's pulling up a page. And that's for when you're using Alta Prima, and that's called Artistic Finish. And this is called the Detail tab, and it's a Detail ellipse tool, so you can move that circle with all the dots to any part of the image. You can make it smaller or larger. You can reshape it, and that's you can then either make the details in that area clearer, or you can clear out the details that have been put in through the filter you use on top of it, or you can increase it so you can control a particular area. So if you want the eyes of somebody's eyes to be really sharp, you can use this feature to do it. Or if you're doing a landscape, for instance, and you want to call people's attention to a particular area of it, then you can use this detailing tool to do that.
ALayer is another processing app for the iPhone, And you retrieve the image you want to work on by going to the icon that the arrow points to. And you see here a variety of ways you can process your image through adding textures, light leaks, lens flare, color adjustment, coloring, gradients, effects. Some of these come with the app, and one or two or three of them you purchase in addition to the app. We're just going to look at a couple of these just to give you a flavor of ALayer. We're going to turn to textures first, and you will see in this app at the bottom of the screen here a long row of a variety of textures that you can choose. You just see 5 on the screen here, but there are more to the left and to the right. I've chosen to add to this image the texture called Burned. You can adjust the opacity using that grayscale there a little below the middle of the screen. And if you adjust it back and forth, you change the opacity of the texture on the image. When you hit the blue downward facing button, you are then introduced to blending modes. And just like in Photoshop, there's a long list of blending modes. You just see several of them here. I chose to blend this image with overlay. And again, see the opacity is almost at full opacity, so you could see the effect of overlay on the image. And then there's several other functions here. One is blur. You can add blur to your image, and you can see you can change the opacity of the blur as well as the blur size. There are adjustment tools, a long row of them here. Some of them include sharpen, contrast, brightness, hue, saturation, the whole exposure, the whole works there. Or you can also then, if you use a brush, you change both the opacity as well as the size of the brush. And let's just take a brief look at light leak. You see that I chose one of the options for light at full opacity, the Light 13 option that added light in a dramatic way to the image.
ToolWiz is a great app for processing your photos. Before I talk about that, I might call your attention to, in case you didn't pick up on it, that Snapseed is available on Android as well as iPhone, and it is exactly the same on both of them, or at least from what I can tell on the iPhone, it is the same. But ToolWiz has a lot of different options for processing, and so it's kind of fun too. This is the one that I did use for the image that I showed that was for afternoon cooler. When you open ToolWiz, this is the main screen that you get. And the Pro Editing is the main processing image. It has a lot of different options there that you will see. The first thing when you tap on that, the first thing you do is it asks you to choose your photo. And you can choose one that's on your phone, or the circle with the 3 dots in the middle of it lets you choose a photo from another app, or you can tap on the camera to make your own photo. Across the bottom of the screen, you'll see a list of the processing options that you have, and I've opened the screen here to the tools option. But I want to mention some of the ones that you aren't going to see. I'm going to show you a little bit about this and toning and effects, but because you won't see the others, I want to just mention some of the things that you can see there. For filters, you can do a black and white, or you can do a vintage look. For portrait, you can do face slimming, or you can do makeup. For decorate, you have options for textures and borders. For the photograph option, you can do a lens blur or a vignette. For enhance, you can clarify or defog. And for art, you can do an oil paint or a sketch. And those are just two from each of those. Every one has 9 to 13 options on the screen. So you have lots of choices. Here, I've chosen the tool screen, and you'll see that several of them are things that you probably are very familiar with already. Patch tool and healing tool, as you saw in another app. And then the crop tool is one that's always popular. So I'm going to show you what the crop screen looks like. When you tap on that, it takes you to this. It has 3 different preset ratios that you can choose from, or you can choose free transform. And when you are happy with your crop, you tap on the green check mark at the top right. Or if you decide that you don't want to crop it after all, or you don't like what you've done, you can tap on the white arrow on the left side, and it will just take you back to the other previous screen without saving any changes. The next option we'll look at is the toning option. And again, you'll see a lot of things here that you're familiar with. You've got levels and curves and white balance and selective color and all kinds of things. And we're going to look at the brightness screen. So the arrow that points to the yellow line at the top is where you adjust your brightness. You just slide that yellow line to the right or to the left. It starts off in the middle, and you just can move it left or right. And below where the arrow is pointing at the -54 shows you how much you've adjusted it. You can also do contrast in the same way if you tap on that. And if you want to see the histogram, you can tap on the top line where you see those lines going up and down. That will show you the histogram, although it's not a very detailed histogram. And when you're happy with it, again, you click on the green check mark, or you can click on the white arrow to go back to the other screen. And the next option that we'll look at is the effects option. And this has some really interesting effects that you can do. You can do a mirror image, a double exposure. You can do water reflection. You can do a kaleidoscope, although I suspect that if you want to do kaleidoscopes, you might want to look at one of the apps that's specifically for that. I'm going to show you the deep render effect. Here you've got some different looks at the bottom, and you just scroll through those looks until you find the one that you want. And this is not the option. I was going to say this is what I used for the afternoon cooler, but it was actually another one. And again, you can save it or go back out of it. And when you're finished with all of your changes, you want to go back to the screen, the previous screen that you were on. And when you see the Pro Editing at the top again, then if you tap to the left of that, it will take you back to the main screen, and then it will ask you if you want to save your image. There are several other selections here. We're going to look at a water reflection and the one prism art, but there's a slideshow and a moments, an explore, and an album, and none of those are processing as such, but they are useful for projects if you want to do those. But we'll look at the water reflections. which has, again, it has a choice of looks at the bottom of the screen. You just scroll through that until you find the one that you want and choose the green check mark or the white arrow to go back. And the prism art looks like this. It's kind of just an abstract. This is the one actually that I used for the cooler. So these are just a few of the things that you can do. You have lots of options because every one of those options at the bottom of the screen to begin with has got at least 9 options under that. So you have plenty of choices.
Okay, so those are the top 4 here on our list. I want to just say a word about the other 5. Distressed FX is an app that has textures and overlays, and it's kind of a distressed or grunge look. And interestingly enough, it was the textures are done by a woman named Sharon, who's from East Tennessee. I also found that there's an Android package kit for Distressed FX, but I don't know enough about it to know how you judge whether the APK sites are, reliable. So, but just to let you know that that's out there. The Touch Retouch is a good app for actually removing unwanted content from photos. There's a brush function, erasure, mirroring, object removal, quick repair, line removal, clone stamp. And Touch Retouch does a much better job than the Snapseed does if it's very complicated. Glaze is one of my favorites. It's another app with a photo painting app. Has 12 groups of 5 different styles each, and plus you can add packs. You can buy packs to add. The Earth Flow that I think I mentioned to you, it may have been done in Glaze. It was either done in Glaze or the Artista Impresso. Big Photo is the one that we had the question about. It can enlarge or downsize. It can custom size. It can change the resolution. You can check size with it. I find it a little bit awkward to use, but it will change the resolution if you want to. And Image Blender is a mixes and combines images. It has masks and blend modes. And here again, this is another one of my favorites.
I want to make a comment about the APK website. They have some apps on that website that are like the ones for the iPhone, but those apps are not available from the Play Store where you can get apps for your Android phone. And so I was a little hesitant to download from that website. It may be perfectly fine. I was just a little leery of it.
And again, here are the icons for these for these ones we just talked about, these apps.
I'm looking, Emily, you want to lead us through the questions on the chat?
Oh, do you see them? You just...
Yes, I see them,
All right, so one of the questions is, for me, imagining, like, the question is how you store your photos, and do you just use them, do you just store them through the pictures function on your phone, or do you import them into your computer? How do you keep up with them? Does it mimic, or is it different than taking photos in your digital camera?
Who wants to go first? Yeah, go, Sue.
I do both. I leave an awful lot of them on my phone, but by the same token, I also bring them onto my computer. So I do both.
What I do is on my phone, or I need to say that I do a lot of my processing on my iPad, rather than my phone, because it is larger. And I know John has a question about size, and iPad works better for me than processing on the phone. But apart from that, I file on my phone or iPad the images into albums of categories that I work with, and the ones I want to work on and keep, I take into my computer and work on Photoshop. I prefer working on Photoshop unless there is an app that gives me a result that I cannot get or haven't yet found in Photoshop.
I often export the photos to my computer, but also sometimes I just download from the from my phone into Lightroom.
And Susan, did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just going to say that at least on my phone, you can partially organize them by putting them in other albums, setting up other albums like for particular topics or whatnot, and then that they stay in your main area, but if you want to find them fast, you can go to an album.
Cool. Now, I've done something to lose the comments. There were a couple of other good questions.
You want me to read? One says, Emily, how big have you been able to print an iPhone photo and maintain crispness? You have that question? Can you see that one?
That's the last one. Yeah, start with that. Yeah.
Somebody want to answer that? Yeah.
I can't speak to it from my phone. First of all, I don't have an iPhone, but I have seen billboards with pictures that said they were taken on the iPhone. So I would guess you can print them pretty large.
Yeah, I've not tried to actually print from my iPhone. I probably use it more to do posting or to send people pictures or that sort of thing. But it depends on the app or the process you use on your computer to get it to the size that you want it.
Susan, you do print a lot of your work that starts on an iPhone.
Yes.
But you're saying it's not particularly limited. You just take it into Photoshop and.
Right, and I use the on-one resize some too. So yeah. I haven't ever tried to do a billboard.
You guys are ready for it. You have some wonderful. Michael, did that answer your question?
Hi, Emily. Yeah, kind of. I mean, I've tried to print stuff from an iPhone photo, and I mean, I tried to print one big. I took it to a professional, and it didn't come out very crisp. So I was wondering if there's a way to shoot in the phone that, should I be shooting in RAW? Does shooting in the TIFF help to make it easier to, because I mean, I think the phone shoots a certain amount of pixels.
That's right.
Or does it? Or can you print theoretically anything you shoot in your phone as large as anything you shot on an SLR?
I think, well, even with SLRs, it depends on how many pixels you've got going into it. I mean, how many, how big the file is. And that's going to make a difference whether it's on your iPhone or it's on your SLR. Some of the SLRs have give you smaller file sizes, and those are a little harder to blow up. But there being some, like Photoshop is increasing in its ability to enlarge things and then as I said, I use on-one resize to do some resize, to enlarge stuff. So, but you've got the basis there, and then the algorithms in those apps, those particular ways of enlarging will do their best. And you can just see if you like it or not.
But you all said,
Does that help, Michael?
I have a tag onto that, and that is that when you then therefore purchase a camera app, one of the first things you need to do is go into the menu that Sue showed you and set the resolution of the images to the largest possible resolution that you can get. And that will help you then, if should you decide to print it later, have a good starting foundation for printing.
that's a great tip. Now, I went back. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I mean, you're the panelist.
Well, I was gonna just go to this question that Bill Lindsay had asked about in respect for processing, and for me, I'd have to say, well, yes, both.
That's
Sometimes I use it because of their unique capabilities, and sometimes I use it because of the convenience and lack of computer access. You know, there's you know, you can be just about any place and whip out your phone and do some processing. And when when you're waiting someplace, or you don't happen to have your computer with you, so and you can go back and forth between the two.
But generally speaking, you would prefer, if you had the time, to use your computer and processing.
I wouldn't say that, Bill. I would say it's there are sometimes I would rather use the apps on the iPhone, and it depends on the images I'm working on too. Like, I really like Image Blender, I really like Glaze, and those I would use, when I want that kind of result, I would use that. Now, Image Blender, certainly has its limitations, and if I want more precise control and detail, then I would take it into Photoshop. But for some of the images I want to do, it works wonderfully. So it kind of depends on all kinds of things, and I can't say that I would always rather do one than the other.
I have a comment about that too. The Android phones, while they make good photos and they do have some good processing apps, Android is way behind iPhone in the apps that they have and the things that they can do with it. So I take mine into Lightroom or Photoshop sometimes because I can't do on my phone what I want to do. Sometimes I can't do it on my computer either, but that's why I try sometimes.
That's great. Thank you.
And in a way, I think y'all maybe have begun to answer John Rowe's question.
Right. It is small, and it's not as powerful as, say, Photoshop, but it's a lot easier to take places. Like, I have this one place I go on occasion, and they don't have internet access without going down to a whole nother building. And so, there again, it's the convenience and lack of computer access that makes me favor my phone in that circumstance.
I think it's personal preference and personal style in terms of a lot of the answer to that question.
But John, do you have anything to add to that?
Now I could get myself unmuted. Okay, let me ask Susan, what are you using a picture for that makes it so necessary to do it right then? That's what I was thinking of that when you answered that.
Oh, because I have the time to do it right then, and I don't have the computer.
But okay, when I look at a picture, okay, what if I want, if I need to cut and paste, if I need to get rid of an element in the picture, and the resolution, I don't know, what does an iPhone shoot at?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to go look.
I mean, I work in 300 PPI all the time. That's it. I don't know that they will go that high. I have the other apps available. I have most everything that Topaz has, and Nick, and I can, whatever I need, I've got there on the computer, plus the high resolution, plus I can cut and paste and stack and all this stuff. And I used a lot of apps at one time.
Uh-huh.
Am I doing this? And I don't anymore, hardly ever.
Well, it sounds like that works better for you.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what I would say. That's your personal style.
Of course, my abstracts, I don't think I could ever do those on a phone.
You might be surprised.
Yeah.
All right, one new message from Bill Lindsley. How do you create folders for groups of photos?
They call them albums. And there's a little Bill, do you have an iPhone?
Yes, you've referred to folders. I didn't know. So those are albums.
Yeah.
What you're okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. These are some other apps that one or more of us just happen to like for the fun aspect. And what here's the graph, the little graph we've been doing for you all, but we've got an image to show you to illustrate, that was done in each of these. So we're gonna go on to those and then talk about the apps that way. So circular is one of those that will twist, turn, spin, rotate, repeat, do all kinds of things, sort of turn your whatever photo you're using into a kind of a circular photo, and then you can do all kinds of things with it.
Tiny Planet is the closest thing I've found on Android to circular, and you can do quite a bit with it, but it won't do all the things that circular does. Although this one's not too bad.
Hipstamatic is another kind of is another app that's geared for the analog camera experience. It has specific different distinctive lenses and films, and also flares, and then it has analog controls. And about the only thing I personally use it for is when I want to cut things up into little blocks or little strips. But you don't have any control on how you do that.
So I have fun with Cam, and it just literally turns the iPhone into a kaleidoscope. But it does give you several different options. You can have a pie shape, a grid shape, a beehive shape, a spiral, or your traditional kaleidoscope. It's a little trippy.
The kaleidoscope for the Android is, it's really just a fun thing. It opens up to the camera, and whatever you're pointing it at, it will automatically make a kaleidoscope kind of pattern on your phone. And the fun thing about that is you move your phone around, you can up and down, sideways, upside down, and it will change as you're watching it. So it's really like a kaleidoscope itself. And you can make some adjustments to the kind of patterns that are there. It's just a really fun thing to do.
Who needs drugs?
Right.
So here are the icons for these the fun apps we've been talking about.
So we said at the beginning, Sue said that right here at the end, we're going to ask you about your own favorite apps and what you like and what you like about them. We have just about 3 or 4 minutes to conclude this, and we are at the conclusion of our presentation after this particular piece, but let's just generate from the group. If you have an app that you really like, why don't you just say what it is, whether it's for iPhone or Android or both, if you know, and what you like about it in 1 or 2 sentences. Sue's going to write down what you suggest.
And mention whether or not it's for Android or iPhone or both.
I said that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I don't see unmute all, so y'all, if you have something to add, you need to unmute yourself.
I have a tilt shift camera
Oh.
that I use occasionally, and this is on an Android, and it just gives you an interesting perspective on some subjects.
Wow.
And
I like that.
I don't know what's available for Apple or not. I'm sure there are several that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Does anything have the equivalent of content aware?
Uh,
Not that I know of.
Now, the kaleidoscope that Susan had, that is a camera. That is not really something you use. I mean, use it when shooting. You don't use it as something to process other with. I don't think you can, unless that's been added recently.
No, it's just a fun thing that you can do. You can shoot with it, but it's not a processing app.
No, I have one you can shoot with. I mean, you shoot it just like it's a separate little camera.
what's the name of it, John? What's the name of the app?
I'd have to go get my phone and look.
Oh, okay. Anybody else have an app?
I have one that I used to use. I think it's changing its name. It's called Enlight, that I used to like, ENLIGHT, and I think it's going to change its name to Firefox or something. Excuse me.
What does it do?
It's more or less what I like about it the most is the painterly things you can do with it. It's kind of like your what is it, Artista Impresso?
Yes.
App. Yeah. And so you can get a lot of painterly looks, and you have a lot of choices on that and presets for that. And that was one I probably used the most in terms of processing.
Any others?
I'm back. It's called multi-lens camera. And I think it's probably only for Android, but I'm not sure. The one I use more than anything else is called retro camera. And it makes like an old time 1930s something picture. See, it's sort of sepia toned, and it's just has that effect to it.
And which
A
phone?
couple of apps I use
Android.
are Carbon. It turns things black and white.
Yes.
I like black and white. And Waterlog, and it's LOGUE. Yeah, it's all one word. And sort of makes sort of a watercolor look. Again, these are just fun effects. And then there's one called Tintype.
One word or two?
One word. But I'm familiar, the Distressed Effects also has a plus version now that has a whole new suite of textures and overlays.
Any others?
The multi-lens camera is great for orbs and for abstracts, to take those patterns and turn them into all sorts of things.
We've come to the end of our time and the end of our presentation. And I want to say thank you all very much for being here. I think we've addressed most of the questions through the...
There was one more that somebody had asked.
Oh, somebody asked about Photoshop Express.
Maybe there are a couple more.
And Pixomatic is another one, Sue, that was listed here.
What is that? P-I, spell it.
Here it's spelled Pixlromatic.
Yeah, X-L-O.
Where would it go here? Ann will have to tell us how to, Ann Richardson will have to tell us how to spell it.
It's Pixlro.
Pixlro.
Matic.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to apologize for coming in late. I got a call from my son and grandkids down in Alabama and Georgia, so that's the reason I popped in late.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John.
We're glad you came.
Well,
There's a lot of, it seems like this is going to be food for further conversation. Everybody's really appreciating it. Excellent presentation. I see, I don't mean to miss this question. Have y'all used the Photoshop Express, Justice Wayne, Thomas Wonders? It's supposed to be specifically for mobile devices.
I've read about it, but I haven't downloaded it and used it.
I haven't either.
There's a fairly new app that Photoshop has put out called Photoshop Camera. I forgot about that one.
Well, it sounds like we've got a lot of experimenting to continue to do. And we may just have to have this be like an annual update with folks. And it was so inspiring to see the photos you all are getting off your phones. And some of the other photos we've seen off of phones have been terrific too. I have a request, Sue Henry.
Can I ask another question?
No, I'll put it in chat.
Okay.
People need to go.
Are you ready for me to stop shares, Emily?
Actually, that'd be fine. I just want to ask you to please send the whole presentation PDF it so we can share it with everybody. There was just so much information there.
Yeah, I've got it. The PDF would be easy to share.
I confess that I missed the first couple of minutes, so therefore we missed a handful of little slides. I forgot to do record.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm going to stop share.
Yeah,
So,
Michael asked a question about, whoops, wrong one.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I can get back to it. Wait a second here.
Is that iPhone 11 significantly better than the 10?
You know, I went from an iPhone 7S to the iPhone 11, so I don't know. Sharon or Sue, do either of you?
no, I don't know.
I don't either. I'm still on a 10.
Sharon's on
I've got an 11 Pro Max because I have bad eyes. It had the biggest screen. And it's got like a 3-lens camera. The 11 has a 2-lens camera. You know, they're going to these different things that you can do. So it kind of has, so it's like you have built-in lenses is kind of the idea behind them, I think. But as far as significantly better, I don't know, you know. They always up the megapixels and put some new feature in that makes it better. I went from a 6 to an 11, so I was way overdue.
Emily, on behalf of the team, I would just want to say our goal and intention was to whet your appetite and stoke your creativity. So we want to wish you happy creating with your smartphones.
perfect. I think you've done.
It was fun.
Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for signing in. See you next month with our book. Well, don't forget, it's a week early, August 18th. See you guys then.
Bye.
I'm going to do.
Thanks, Emily.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.